Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Seiko watch's Speedtimer. This is the SRQ041. But first off, before I go any further, I gotta let you know this guy was sent to me, not by the manufacturer actually, but by a retailer, by Lewis Jewelers in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They are my AD for Seiko, Omega 2 to Tag, Breitling, and more. They could be your AD as well, right? Call DK, tell him Nick sent you. He might be able to help you out with some promotional pricing, but nonetheless, he can help you find the watch you want and help you out with any of those brands. And they've been great to me, and hopefully they'll be great to you. But I told them, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. Might be a gem, it might be junk. They did still send it along as a loaner. So anyways, that's how this came to me. Thanks again, Lewis Jewelers. Next thing, let's do some size measurement because this guy is big. We'll just start there. This guy is big. We're looking at about 42 millimeter overall case size. If we add in the crown here, we're closer to 46, which, oh boy. The lug-to-lug distance, which is one of the biggest, determiners for people with slight wrist, is a reasonable 49.6 millimeters, but the thickness ain't that far off of that. We are looking at a 15.5 millimeter thickness on this guy, and that is wild. And given how much of it is above the lugs, this feels incredibly thick on the wrist. And so there is that. And then the diameter of the face, for actually reading the time, about 35 millimeters, and the lug width here, we are looking at is about 20 millimeters. So that is the size of this guy. It is a big, thick boy. So there is that. Like I said, this is the SRQ041. This is a limited edition one, which is based on the, let's see here, World Athletic Championships Oregon 22. But there were other versions of it with different dial colors like the SRQ037 and SRQ043. Those are all available in our non-limited. So although this particular one is limited, the other ones are very much not, and so that is something you can, keep in mind. And then finally, just to give you a little bit of a heads up, even though this is a Seiko, this is not a cheap one. This is $3,200, which is, of course, why you do not get into watches. So anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting watch right here. And one other thing that's worth noting is I have not spent time with this on the wrist, partly because it wouldn't fit, but partly because this guy is on loan to me, and I want to keep it pristine for the next person who ends up picking it up. So anyways, there you go. Let's jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. So on the good side, to start with, this has a very retro aesthetic. If we zoom in a little bit here, this feels very much of the 60s, of the Mad Men sort of era, right? And I think that's kind of a cool thing, right? That is very much an in aesthetic right now, and I think that's great. I think they've done a very nice job making this very attractive, and the indices are well done. Overall, the watch is pretty cool looking. Next thing, this has an 8R46 movement, which you can actually see through the case back there, kind of behind all this other stuff. There is a protective sticker on there, but again, I'm leaving that on there to protect it for the next dude. So what we're going to see here is this, you can see the movement through there. This is an 8R46 movement. It's a 45-hour power reserve. It has a date function. We see the date right down here. We see it has hacking seconds, meaning if I take the crown and I pull it all the way out, then the second hand on this guy stops, which is a nice thing. We see here that it is a chronograph, meaning it is actually measuring the passage of time. If you press this guy here, it starts the chronograph, and if you press it again, it stops it, and then this guy resets it. And so that's a nice thing. And, I gotta say, date is very often missing from chronos, so I do appreciate that it's there. It is using a column wheel vertically crutched chrono, and that may not mean anything to you, and if it doesn't, then, hey, life is good, right? But it's another way to do the chronograph that's generally pretty reliable. You can get measurements down to 1/8 of the second, which is what they're claiming on there, which is not super important given human reaction time, but it's still nice to see. It is an automatic movement, meaning it will wind just from the movement of your wrist, which is a beautiful thing. It is a hand winding movement as well. You can do that. And it runs, in this guy, this particular watch runs on my time grapher between 0 and 7 seconds per day, depending on the position you've got it in. So that's a very nice accuracy. So the movement on this guy seems absolutely good to go. Next thing, this has a very satisfying reset. When I press this guy down and let it run for a little while, and then I stop it, when you press this button, boom, all the way back in the fraction of an eye, right? Fraction of an eye, that's not even a thing. Well, I guess that would be the dot at the top. Okay, anyways, moving on. So this has a very satisfying instant reset, which is a beautiful thing. And just feels good. The buttons on the whole feel good. They've got a nice strong detent. Very little play. That works well. So that's good. Next thing, this is a fully loomed watch. I'll go ahead and I'll charge this guy off screen with a very powerful flashlight. And we will see we see dots of lume all over this guy, right? And it's actually hard to tell because the hour and the minute hand are on top of each other. Allow me to fix that and charge one more time. There we go. And what we're going to see here is that the each one of the hours are lumed and marked. See every single hour, as well as the minute hand, as well as the hour hand. There is no lume on any of the chrono hands, and there is no lume on the second hand, which is an important thing to consider. So there is that. Next thing, this guy has a 100-meter water resistance. It is rated to 100 meters. The crown is not screw down, and neither of the pushes are either. And so that's a little bit impressive, honestly. They must be just doing that with seals, but it's nice to hear that it is, rubber seals in there, rather than they're off swimming with seals to prototype. Although maybe they do. I don't know what people in Seiko get up to over there. But nonetheless, that's a good amount of water resistance here. It is a full sapphire crystal. Sapphire on the top, sapphire on the bottom. It had better be for this kind of price point, but that's that. And then finally, I got to say the finishing is very nice, especially on the dial itself. It's just, overall, there is nice finishing around the outside of this guy. You know, little bits of fingerprint here and there, but they've got nice contrasts between brushed and polished. You can see the Nick Shabazz t-shirt available at nickshabazz.com/merch. You can see all kinds of things, and the bracelet itself is nicely done. Just overall, it is a very nicely finished little shirt. Wow, got a little too tied up in the plug right there. But anyways, a very nicely finished little watch, and to me, all of that is the good, is that it has a great dial. I'm sorry. Good Lord, people. It has very nice finishing, a nice sapphire crystal, a 100-meter water resist, which is nice. It is fully lumed, and the satisfying instant reset on that chronograph. It is a 8R46 movement with lots of good features, and it is a retro aesthetic that is very hot right now. On the great side, to me, is this dial, 100%. I want to zoom in a little bit here. The dial on this guy is very nice for a bunch of reasons. We've already talked a little bit about the vintagey kind of indices, and having polished hands as well as polished indices is a nice thing because when you are low on light, you can still get a lot of reflection off of those indices, and you can still tell the time pretty well even without the lume. That's a very, very nice thing, and I think the vintage look on them looks great too. It is the polishing of the hands is nice, and they're not just flat hands, they are actually tented. They're kind of down to either side, and so you can see that little bit of distinction is there, and so I appreciate that very much. That's good. I like the yellow second hand on there, although it's actually interesting. It doesn't rest exactly at 60, exactly down the middle there. So that's kind of a little bit odd, but hey, whatever. There is that, and it just has a great dimensionality to it, right? Because you have the crystal at the very top here, then you've got this chapter ring with all of the seconds markings, then you have a little bit of a re-out there. This little area is a little bit lower than the middle parts here, and then you've got this dial, and the dial itself almost looks like one of the paper dials that you find on some of the higher-end Grand Seiko stuff, right? It's a very interesting, and it's a very textured dial. It's very different. Someplace between, like a paper or a pleather or something like that. It's kind of a really cool texture with an applied Seiko logo at the top there, which is great. I really like the dial of this. That is the most attractive part of this watch by an absolute mile for me. And I think, just every part of this dial has been done very, very well. And so I appreciate that very much. The fact that it's got depth, the fact that it's got good polish. It's a great dial. And so to me, that is 100% what is great. On the bad side, to start with, this is the official timer of the World Athletics Championships in Oregon of 2022. Apparently, that is a thing. Apparently, it happened after the Olympics got rid of some track and field events, something. But this is the official timer of it. And I'm going to be honest with you, that strikes me as so dumb. Whenever people do the official timer of X, it's like, no, you're not timing a damn thing at a serious competition with a mechanical chronograph. I mean, it's fine for casual use. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but I'm saying that human reaction time is itself busted. We are not good at responding quickly to things, and 1/8 of a second accuracy isn't enough for athletic use, right? They're going to be using lasers and quartz oscillators and precision switches if they want to time an actual athletic event. This is not the official timer. That's not what they're going to be doing, right? I mean, sure. It's like calling the Toyota Corolla the official car of Formula One. It's sure. I mean, you can say that. You can do that as a marketing thing, but is it really? So, I don't know. Those things always strike me as weird. I know it's just a branding exercise, but I don't think this should be the official timer of anything where time really matters, because no chronograph, on the hand of any human with human reaction time should time anything. Anyways, I digress. So, that's kind of a weird thing. But more more importantly, I dislike this caseback art because there's a quite attractive movement in there that is being partly obscured by this logo. Like, just put that around the outside there, right? Like, who, in 20 years, who's going to care about the World Athletic Championships? And okay, I'm sorry, there are a number of athletes who probably care deeply about this, but still, for most people, this doesn't matter, and you're covering up something that is very cool that does matter. And so I just don't care for that. Next thing, this is a limited edition. I'm not so bent out of shape about it because there are lots of other versions of this watch that are not limited at all, so it doesn't bug me that much, but it is definitely a thing. Next thing, anytime you buy a chronograph watch, it adds complexity, right? Unless you need that added functionality of being able to time something very precisely, you're going to end up spending more money when you get it serviced because there's more complexity, more parts, etc., and you lose a little bit of durability relative to a non-chrono watch. And you add, in this case, a bunch of thickness. This is a very, very thick watch, as well as a less readable second hand, right? This is the running second hand for the watch rather than this guy. And so that is definitely a thing you want to consider, right? So chronographs are not going to be the right choice for everybody's daily wear, although a lot of people still use them that way and, just don't care, right? Next thing, on Seiko's website, if you look at the advertisement for this, they say they are promising you plus 25 to minus 15 seconds per day. Now, I want to be clear. This particular watch on a time grapher is 0 to 7 seconds per day. That is a very good rate, but plus 25 to minus 15 is not a number they should be advertising. That is an embarrassing number, right? And I know that this is them under-promising and over-delivering, but even the possibility of getting a watch that is plus 25 seconds per day for $3,200 is obscene. And so they need some kind of equivalent to COSC certified if they are selling over $900 or so. I'm sorry, there's just no way that you should be able to say minus 15 is acceptable at $3,200. Like, I know they're trying not to do that. They're probably regulating them well, but at the same time, even saying that, there should be somebody at Seiko who's just like, who put that on the website, right? That's ugly. Next thing, this guy, the buttons on this are huge, right? They are very, very, very large, and they are going to catch on things because they are not mounted particularly low. There is a solid, well, let's see here. There's a solid, maybe 2 to 3 millimeters between the bottom of the button and the top of your wrist there. And so as a result, these are going to get caught on things as you like put your arm into a strap or something like that. That can be problematic. But also, I actually was over with at a friend over yesterday who had a relatively large wrist. He put this guy on just kind of jokingly because it actually fit his wrist, and he was able to turn the watch, like start and stop the chronograph with one hand just by tilting his wrist up like that. Right? That is a little wild, right? And so there's a lot going on here, right? And compared to some other chronographs with much more subtle, much smaller buttons, you're going to have to use this chrono every day because you're going to be using it every day because it's going to turn on anyways. So you want to keep that in mind. That's definitely a factor here. Next thing, speaking of the chronograph, as we've got this guy running here, we see that this is measuring seconds, right? This gives you the sweep. And then this subdial here with the yellow measures minutes. And the thing is, minutes are great, but this only gives you a 30-minute maximum measurement. And to be clear, it'll keep going. And so if you just keep track of how many times you've been around 30 minutes, you're kind of okay. But a 30-minute maximum timer on a chronograph is a little bit disappointing at this. It kind of decreases the usefulness a little bit. Now, I get that if you are timing short things over and over again, just having that small amount makes it a lot easier to read the exact minute value off the chronograph. But when there are people out there, and given this is a watch that is several times more expensive, this is a 12-hour chronograph with 2 different hands there. 30 minutes, I don't know. So you have to ask yourself, what are you timing in your life where you need a chronograph, and is it only under 30 minutes? Because if it's over 30 minutes, you might want something with a little bit more duration, a little more staying power there. So that's a thing you want to consider, right? And then finally, on the bad side, the price on this is very high, right? This is a $3,200 wristwatch. That's a lot of money. It's a nice watch, but boy, is that a lot of money. And the thing is, you can get a much nicer watch for less, even from Seiko, if you don't need a column wheel chronograph. You're paying a lot for that complexity. But you have got to love this watch to really want to pay that price, right? But more importantly, you got to talk to your AD or talk to Louis Jewell and talk to mine and see if you can get some good promotional pricing because, boy, is this thing expensive. That's a lot of money for this guy, and it feels very, very high for Seiko's regular range. So, to me, all of that is the bad, is that it is a $3,200 retail price, a 30-minute max timer. The buttons are huge. It is a promised 25 to plus 25 to minus 15 seconds per day. Although it's substantially better in practice, that number is still bad. They shouldn't use it. The chronographs add complexity. It is a limited edition. There is a case back art obscuring an otherwise pretty attractive movement back there. And the official timer watch thing is so dumb. So dumb. Anyways, on the ugly front, unfortunately, there are two ugly issues here. The first one you could already guess by the fact that it says Seiko right here. That is that the bracelet is a little bit lazy, right? This is a bracelet using cotter pin links. That's fine. Those are perfectly reasonable. This is also a $3,200 watch. I'm sorry, not cotter pin, but these are pinned links rather than screw-down links. I should be very clear about that. I believe these to be pinned links. I didn't pull them out. Maybe there is. But anyways, that's still bad, right? These should be screw-down links at the very, very, very least. They do include two half links, which is nice, right? This is a full-size link. This is a half link. That's good. But then, more importantly, they have no method of adjusting this watch without removing a link, right? There is no tooled quick adjust. There is no area here where you can adjust that out. Like, this is a $300 Seiko, and it has, right here, 4 different adjustment positions here. They have gone with a butterfly clasp, and that makes this a very thin bracelet, which is nice, although a little weird when the head of the watch is so thick. But it's just like, what are you doing, right? I genuinely don't get Seiko's division. Like, it feels like they must have a division of people dedicated to tracking down anybody trying to improve bracelets on their high-end models, because it feels like it should have happened organically by now if they... I don't know. It's just simply unacceptable at this price point to have bracelets with no adjustability beyond removing and adding links. That's just not okay, and especially with this with pinned links rather than screw-down links, it just makes it needlessly difficult. Other brands are able to do so much more in the bracelet department for so much less money. It's just not good. So the bracelet on this guy at $3,200, absolutely not, no. And then the other ugly issue on this guy is the thickness of it. This guy is an incredibly thick watch. It really is. It's completely wild. I took this guy out of the bag that they sent it in. They sent it in a little Lewis Watch Club bag, and I started laughing, right? It is ridiculous, and it makes for a very top-heavy experience. It's also very heavy as well. If they had a bigger clasp, actually, that would help to offset it, which is why they should have used one of the toolless quick adjust clasps like they have for some of the Grand Seiko divers, just saying on there. But it is a fine little watch, but you really will need to be a huge person for this to feel proportional. My buddy who has a huge wrist, this almost worked on him. This worked, but this is really big and really thick, and so you have to be okay with that. This right here is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, and the lack of anything to counterbalance it on this end, especially when the result is this, I'm not seeing it. So to me, that's what's ugly here, is it is very, very thick, and the bracelet on this guy is just not very good. And to me, those are the ugly things. Final conclusion, this is a really unusual offering, right? It's got a very nice retro aesthetic. It's got a solid and pretty interesting chrono movement. It's got a very satisfying reset. It's got full lume, good water resistant crystal, a very nice dial with lots of full, nice details, dimensionality. All of those things are very good, but it is an official timer, which... okay. It's got tacky case back art, a needless limited editioning. It's got added complexity from a chronograph, a ridiculous range of acceptable accuracy, even though this particular watch was much better than that. It's got huge buttons, 30-minute chronograph, which is a little bit odd, a $3,200 retail price, which is very odd, a deeply lazy bracelet, and a relatively wild thickness. This watch, to be clear, is absolutely not for me. On my wrists, this would be absolutely hilarious, and it makes sacrifices that I really don't want in terms of thickness and price in exchange for features I don't need, like a 30-minute chronograph. It just doesn't make sense for me. In fact, I would go so far as to say this isn't really a general-purpose watch. I mean, sure, I have no doubt there are people out there right now who wear this as their only watch every day, right? But if you don't need a chronograph, this is just thicker and more complicated and more expensive than you need. And frankly, if you do need a chronograph, if you are timing things regularly, you should ask yourself if you want the thickness and the complexity here associated with going mechanical chronograph rather than going quartz, right? I looked at the SSC813 some time back, which was another quartz chronograph from Seiko, which was a very, very nice watch. It was still a little bit on the thicker side, but that is a much, much more reasonable watch in a lot of ways. And so if you don't need mechanical chronograph, if that's not important to you, then quartz actually offers a lot of compelling value in the chronograph space and size differences. And if you want a mechanical chronograph, you should ask yourself, is 30 minutes worth of timing enough for me? Are those what you're going to be measuring in your life? For a lot of people, yeah, sure. And if that's so, then great. So if you do need a 30-minute chronograph, even still, think about the size of this guy. This is a little bit wild, and whether this is going to do well on your wrist, and whether you're okay with a bracelet that doesn't adjust with you at all. But if all of those things are okay, then by God, I guess this is reasonable, right? Ultimately, at this price, at this size, and at this feature set, this is a watch you will have to fall head over heels in love with, right? This watch needs to be perfect for you. And one of the things I always try and do is think to myself, to what human would I recommend this watch? To whom would this make sense? And like, I'm picturing a giant human, like, the fire giant from Elden Ring at this point, or the mountain from, just a big, big person. Maybe a giant sports coach of some variety who is constantly using a stopwatch, right? One of those people with a stopwatch around their neck 24/7, right? And always has that in hand, who just hit some very important milestone in his life and wants to commemorate it with a very, very fancy watch, but wants something that is very extra and fancy in terms of finishing, in terms of the mechanical elements, etc. But they want it to wear maybe, I don't know, on a fabric strap or something, so that, it works a little. But nonetheless, to me, that is the Speedtimer's perfect story. Somebody who is constantly using a short-term chronograph over and over and over again, and is a huge person and wants something big and fancy and extra. That is exactly who this is for. There may be other people out there, and if you look at this going, this is perfect for me, tell me about your life in the comments, right? I'm curious. But this needs to have a very specific person. So what I will say, final conclusion about this guy, is if you are looking at this and you don't see the price, you don't like the size, you don't need the features, then you know what? I mean, speed right past this little guy right here, right? This is not going to be the right choice for you. But if you're looking at this and you're in love with the aesthetic, you're in love with the features, you're in love with the functionality, and you're even in love with the size and the car, then by God, I guess pick one of these guys up. You'll probably have a pretty good time. Okay, anyways, I'll end this now for the sake of avoiding future puns, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.